Like, how big a truck do you need?
Yeah, wagon,
Just
yeah,
a
trailer,
Big trailer, big
trailer.
stock trailer.
Behind your pickup truck.
Goats are really hardy thing.
Yeah.
Our
Sure,
sheep
like
goes out
construction.
all the time.
Yeah.
Back and forth. But
Yeah, it's just funny, but like every couple of days, it seems like a big job. And at any rate,
Cheaper than a lawnmower.
very interesting.
Right.
Yeah, we get a lawnmower in a while. It's
And a guy to
or
work
a
with. or
bushwhacker
whatever.
or whatever.
This meeting is being recorded.
Okay, did everyone have a chance to look over the minute? And did they have any comment changes?
I move we accept the minutes as presented.
Second that.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Do we have anyone?
GNAT is on, for the recording, but no other participants.
Okay,
Right.
so I'm going to assume there's no public comment. So we'll go right to the town office pay request.
So the total for the past month, a little bit less than last month, around $105,000. And on the second page, you can kind of see what it constitutes. So we're doing some like under slab trades and preparing for the slab. The slab is now poured. Yeah, a lot of nailer and brain time for concrete work.
You have a motion to approve? Was
Go
that,
ahead,
was that?
Jim, I don't
motion?
want to steal your thunder.
Okay, so.
I got a motion to approve
The payment.
I will second.
All in favor, say aye.
We have a choice.
No, you don't.
Do we want to keep it moving?
And then just a little update related to town office construction. I mentioned the slab is poured. Walls are starting to get framed. The well is in, the utilities obviously under the slab. On my desk before you all leave, I can show you that it's called gravel, which is a glass foam material. So
Yeah,
instead of
very curious.
using rigid foam underneath the slab.
Yeah.
It was nice of you to put that in the
Yeah,
email.
Yeah, that was really
Yeah.
cool.
Yeah, so it's recycled glass basically, but somehow is treated and turned into foam. But it has insulating qualities, so instead of gravel and rigid foam, you just use kind of a little bit of gravel and a bunch of that. Which is kind of neat, and it comes from Burlington, that's where it came from. And it actually, I think, you end up with a higher R value using that stuff than the rigid foam, which is kind of interesting, yeah. And there's a lot of, if you go and see the site, you're gonna see the walls are double framed 2x6, so it's a foot thick. Yeah, it's not normal construction, so it's kind of fun to see it.
The wall, you mean the walls of
The wall cavity, yeah, the wall cavity,
down below.
no, of the actual structure of the
framing.
building, the framing of.
So
the
is that to
building.
get it to the 0?
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yep, and
Wow.
that's gonna be filled with, dense packed cellulose, and there's the triple glazed windows. Everything down to, there's a wrap that comes from underneath the slab up, up over the sills to the wall structure that gets adhered and then air sealed. So that even, every little bit of, like every connection, every cold connection between kind of construction phases is really thought about. And there's, all the way down to the butt ends of like the sheathing on the outside, their call outs for where they go, how they're taped, how they're sealed, all that stuff. Because the
So,
airflow mitigation is like that's the key component to.
so
keeping
heating
building
the
tight.
place just means all you have to do is turn on a hairdryer every once in a while.
The architect would I think early in the process told us that, if you get a warm day in the winter with staff in there, that alone with a little bit of sun and the body heat from the office workers can get you probably to 50, 60 degrees by itself.
Wow.
So then, yeah, you don't need a
You don't need
ton.
much heat.
Yeah.
no,
And
It's
that's,
amazing.
it is, yeah, it is. So I think, the timbers are supposed to be here in about, I think, 3 weeks. So the structure of the building should really start to look like a building in
Mhm.
about 3 weeks or so. And there's already some walls going up. The vault is gonna get built, I think this week or next week. So I think the idea is somewhere between the holidays, they're hoping to have it, more or less dried in so that they can start
Yeah.
with interior work.
Is there a lot of reinforcement under the vault? Like, do they have to put extra slab? Or how
It
does
has
work?
its own footers,
Uh-huh.
just like the exterior foundation. So it has its own footers and then, yeah. And then there's rebar that comes up out of the footers that gets connected to the walls.
Mhm.
It's definitely, it is a specialty. It's all masonry work, but it's
Right.
definitely specialty stuff.
Interesting.
Trying to think what else. The well ended up overflowing so that they're working through, I think they put it in, but they've installed like an overflow pipe. And I think that it's pretty close to that being done. We are gonna have to go back and the engineer, I think initially, when they had spec'd out the limits of disturbance and the tree removal, they were a little conservative on the back part of the building, the part of the land that's right behind the building.
Mhm.
So we're gonna have to do some additional tree clearing and grubbing in that location, because there's definitely, there's, those red pines,
Mhm.
or there's some of them that are within, 15 feet of the building or something,
Yeah.
so it's just, so that I think will be a add-on. And Hunter is willing to do it, and they haven't given us a price yet, but we'll see what happens.
Where is the well and how many times did it take them to find it?
Well is behind, kind of behind the southeastern corner of the building,
Okay.
and they were successful on the third try.
Okay.
And the vendor was pretty good that they charged us to have to abandon the wells that didn't work out, which I think was a few $1,000s, but they did not charge us for the day and a half of drilling that, to do those 2 wells. So I think we did spend more, but I think we're making out okay. Yeah, so it's, if you haven't driven by, definitely be driving by soon, because the it's starting to go vertical, which is fun.
It's another drive by.
The well overflowing is that normal? That occurs sometimes?
Yep.
Mhm.
That's what artesian means.
Yeah,
So if someone says, oh, this is artesian water, it just means the well naturally has pressure to overflow.
So
we
does
have
that mean you have a lot of?
Yeah, we're playing with water down there.
so I think the capacity is about 30 gallons a minute. Which is, I think
That's, wow.
Yeah,
that's
that's
a lot of
pretty
water.
good, and I think the water supply permit says we have to have 18 or something like that. Water or fire, one or the other, there's a specific call out in one of them, so.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it will have to, Frank knows the terminology, but public non-transient,
Right,
I
we're
think.
transient on community,
Yeah, there's some, it does have to.
because we don't have more than 24 people who every day, so transient on community,
Okay.
it's just a slightly step up in permitting requirements.
And I'm trying to think of anything else. Oh, I think that's the job trailers there. And it should start to really get put together. And the site super, Craig is just really good, really, really good.
Yeah. Fantastic.
That, we're able to work through the back and forth with the architect so far, and seems like everybody's on the same page, and they're excited to get things rolling along.
And so we're still, relatively speaking.
I don't have
on the
a,
right timeline?
I don't have a indication otherwise. I think that we're still June 25 is kind of the thinking. They haven't, in order to go beyond there's an allocation for days in the contract.
Mhm.
So in order to go beyond that, they'll have to do a change order for that. And they're not, they haven't indicated anything yet, so still kind of too early to tell. So far, so good. Yep.
Housing committee?
All right, Liz was, couldn't make it last meeting, so she's asked me to give a quick report. First of all, Rob, thanks for circulating that email with the 7 days article. That was
Yeah, we're not
really,
we don't take up a lot of space. But
really
a
interesting.
little bit.
Well, what was particularly in my mind was just how many more towns
Yeah.
are kind of taking on this model of them giving some land, them creating the infrastructure, and then inviting in developers to
Yeah, for sure. We're definitely not the only ones doing it.
finish the
Start
job.
looking at it.
So yeah, we met I think the 18th of September. And we reviewed the redesign from Enman and Kesselring. And that redesign showed a little more diversity of buildings, meaning single family duplexes up to quadruplexes. And a little more integration of the demographics of housing those who's going to be housed in those buildings. A little more clustering and adding a little more interest in the access road by just adding some curves instead of being a straight line. But we all generally thought it was an improvement. Also, we spent some time discussing the new Act 181 and why I think we need to get out in front of this legislation to try to maintain some local control and Dorset's development. And Rob sent around some wording to be included in the regional plan that hopefully will.
That seemed to be focused on us defining this as, so that is the intent there to say this is where we want to do it, so that would give us the flexibility.
Yeah, if it's specifically called out in the plan, and then another next step would be to look at the town plan and try to get some of that similar language integrated.
Yeah.
So that once you get into some kind of a permitting process, that you're not, because that's the type, those documents are typically going to be used against you to make an argument for or against something. So if it's explicitly kind of outlined.
It's kind of like the energy code. If you want to have flexibility to do something, you gotta build it into your plans, and then you can.
Yep.
And they have a harder time saying that's not what you're supposed to do.
It seems like the regional commissions are going to be kind of the pivot people in this whole process. They're going to be basically representing us with this state commission that's going to be approving.
How about the
these
League of
things.
Cities and Towns? Are they done? Are they in it too, or not really so much?
I'm
Regional
pretty sure
commission.
that we lobbied against this very vigorously from the league, so, and we lost. So I think the next step is to try to pick up the pieces and, advise towns as to how they need to participate in the process.
Cause you do need a say up there. God, like Montpelier could be just scary as all get out.
Yep.
They'll left to their own devices.
So look, Enman and Kesselring are continuing soils testing to perfect the data that will support the number of units that we can build up there. And then this will allow us to finalize the capacity study and the maps for a later presentation to the select board. We've also asked Enman and Kesselring to estimate the cost of designing and permitting this entire project, including water, wastewater, stormwater, roads, and whatever else it's going to take to bring this to the local board and the state boards for permitting. And then we thought that the next step is to interview the various development players in this area. So Rob put together a list of potential candidates, and I think we're just in the beginning process of trying to schedule those, and so that then we can listen to what their needs are, and what is going to make this really easy for them, and just what is their perception of the marketplace, and how do they finance these developments, and how do they even manage them later on. So that'll be interesting to hear, more. And this seems to be an area where there's a lot of change, change of players. So, but we'll get the information and again, digest that, bring it back to we as a select board.
Just curious, thinking about, there was like the Culver Lane. Is there somebody sort of in charge of that still?
THM manages the property.
And
So
who
kind of like
are they paid by the property owners or what?
yeah, there's,
So I was thinking when you were saying, developers often like to, do the deal and then make their money and get out or something. I just didn't know how that long-term worked. Don't have a clue.
yep, no, they have I believe it's a contract, with the entity that owns it, which is, called Dorset Community Housing LLP, I think. The town is a stakeholder in it because we hold a mortgage that was passed through. So we got a block grant and pass through the block grant so that they can do, construction.
So we still have some sort of say, but we don't have an obligation to it.
Yeah, if there were to be issues with, the management of financing, we hold a lien on it, so we would be, one of the decision makers. We're vested essentially. So.
But the actual owner of the property is not THM,
It is,
Community
Dorset
Trust?
Community Housing, which is a,
not for profit.
yeah,
And do they pay taxes or they exempt property taxes?
no, they pay taxes, but when it was approved, there's some in statutes, there's some allowances for reductions. So they pay taxes minus a certain percentage that was like laid out when it first got built. It's like minus 8% or something like that. There's some, you'd have to look at the Lister card, but, yes, they do pay property tax.
I was just curious. And those property taxes, do they actually charge the tenants for them, or is it coming from the not-for-profit? And because it's sort of it's not quite subsidized, it's like low.
It comes, I
Below
believe
market rate.
that like THM manages the admin stuff for the not for profit. That's how it works. Is the tax check comes from THM.
Did they pass that through to the
They
tenants?
they collect rents from the tenants.
And the tenants include a portion that goes to cover the taxes.
So the tenants don't own, they're just tenants, so they don't
Right.
individually own the units, the rental
Oh.
units. The single families at the end all pay individual property taxes to the town.
Yeah, that's what I'm just wondering, if
The
whose
rental
pocket
units-
is the tax coming out of?
Yeah, the
Because
rental
it's a
units, the
not-for-profit.
taxes comes from THM.
So it's gotta be a
Theoretical from
solvent,
the rent.
Correct.
a solvent entity where the rent and everything
It's a circle-
covers,
it's a circle,
Yeah, that's my
It's
thing.
sufficient
A
to-
portion
Yep.
of the rent is actually
There's
gonna be,
rent,
Yeah.
there's
Covering that
utility
property
costs,
tax.
and then there's maintenance.
because those are below market rentals, are they not?
Mhm. Some are,
but as a total,
there's some market
it's
rate.
sustainable, I guess.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's set up to be a circle.
Does this organization do anything else other than Culver?
THM manages other properties.
No, no,
They
the,
own some stuff.
The community, the
No.
Dorset,
No, it's specific to that entity.
Yeah, it's all one big group.
do we know who is the principal of this?
It essentially is gonna be THM.
So there are no names attached to it. There's no
There would be-
president, there's
there-
no board, there's no,
No, the town is a
Property
stakeholder,
management
THM,
company.
and then it would be Evernorth for Housing Vermont.
Huh.
Would be the three entities that
Huh.
more or less are in charge of it.
okay.
And what other properties does THM manage? Is it
Fields,
Local-
Meadows, a bunch in Manchester.
so very localized though?
That's not Paul Croce's.
So that's
That's
TPW.
TPW.
TPW. But that TPW does essentially the same thing.
No, they manage, just kind of
Like condos.
private
on
owned
Stratton,
Right.
yeah,
market.
Second
rate
homes,
stuff, yeah.
that sort of thing.
Oh, okay,
more high ends.
okay.
And do we know who she again is? Who the principal is that?
Eaton's. I believe.
Heaton?
Oh. I think so.
Don Heaton?
Yeah,
Okay.
Kate, oh. Equinox Terrace.
Mhm.
Okay. All right, Rob, you also mentioned in, I think, last meeting that we should start designing buildings, maybe hire an architect. to-
That's definitely part of something that we should be thinking about. I mean, the committee, Greg Boshart, who's on the committee, was good enough he's got some examples of, designs that he came up with that, I think we could probably build off of. But at some point, the visuals, the visuals with the capacity study would be a nice thing to have so that you
Yeah.
have here's a group of different housing units and what they might look like.
Yeah.
And it's not just cookie cutter from a picture from somewhere else. It's
Yeah.
actually been
Right.
kind of designed a little bit to
Yep.
to have a Dorset edge, I guess.
And then you also mentioned starting an evaluation of the rare, threatened, endangered. So is that, at what point do we kind of put that RFP out or?
I think so that would be part of the, and kind of a follow-up to the next step of design. And then is now kind of breaking out the design process into two parts, preliminary and then final.
Okay.
And the RTE study would be part of that preliminary stuff. So like they've already had some touch points with Fish and Wildlife staff about, coming to visit in the appropriate time of year to be looking for, certain plants and stuff like that. So, and I think that there may or may not be some synergies like soon, like if the capacity study's done, we've already indicated that we want to move on to kind of next steps. So that some of that stuff could potentially start to happen a little bit, because I do believe there's some, either one of the plants or both of the plants, there's an early winter, late fall kind of review time that's needed. And if you don't hit that window, then you can wait a year.
So we need to do that soon then. So-
My understanding from Patrick earlier today is that we have that opportunity now.
So E&T would manage that process.
Mhm.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, that's pretty much it. I mean, the model at this point, I think that we're all believing in is that by designing and permitting and installing all the necessary infrastructure, then this will become a very attractive project to to other developers to work on. And hopefully they're knocking at our door. How do we get a chance to do this?
I know you and I spoke about this earlier, Henry, and one of the things that, and again, when you're not on, I said this to Henry, when you're not sitting in these housing committee meetings, it's such a complicated, it's hard to get your head around all the different pieces. And so one of my questions was, well, basically, like, who owns the land? So for each of these, we've got single family, we've got duplex, multifamily, and it almost seems like a Shire's Housing might be doing rentals of multi-housing, but then are the individual houses, are those being sold, and are we selling that land, or is the town holding on to land? Like, who owns that land is kind of an.
I think the answer is that we don't know. In a
Right.
perfect world, what Henry said is we would do all the baseline work and then hopefully put out an RFP for a developer to just grab it up and do what we want. So that, the ownership would then matriculate however it did. If they're single families, they'd be owned individually. If there's multi-units, maybe it's owned by the developer, or some other, some other company. So I think it's a little early to
Trying to
even
figure that out.
know, yeah. But typically what happens with these is you have to go out and get different partners from here, there and yon. They all have different funding stuff and you all have to kind of jump through a bunch of different hoops because there can be competing, requirements and visions and stuff like that. I think what we're kind of holding out hope for a little bit is that, with a lot of the baseline stuff done, it potentially takes out a lot of the, those initial costs that are why people don't develop,
Right.
right? It's removing that barrier from the whole process.
But then that gives us the ability to negotiate with
Correct,
our
yeah.
partners.
Yeah, so then it
We're
brings in,
gonna take all the risk
in
of-
hope, a viability of market rate. So if there's a viability of market rate, that means that somebody could make money off of a unit. And then the town has got to figure out, okay, well, how many of the units are, benchmarked to a certain price point.
Mhm.
So that it's gonna put the people in the units that we want. And then, there's gonna be a back and forth and there's gonna be a, point at which, whatever percentage of
Right.
Subsidized units is what's feasible.
And that's
Based
why
on how much it's gonna cost for the developer to come in, buy the land, build the stuff.
And that's what they're doing in Barry and all, that article that you were in, that what they're doing in other locations similar.
I think it depends on the community and the people they're trying to serve. So there's lots of funding available for 80% of median income and less. There's money available for that. And there's, I think, a little bit available for up to 120. And then when you get over 120% of MHI, there's, basically
And it's gotta support itself.
no money
It has to
available.
be economic.
Yeah, so, and I think in the missing middle, quote unquote, that is being talked about it's over that 120. I mean, you're in that, and the workers that we're talking about trying to have housing for are potentially over that.
But by designing it in such a way to be a lower cost point,
If the market rate stuff can make them enough money that, here's where it gets in, is the town doing all the work and then giving it, right? So that
Right.
there's, that stuff is all kind of taken away, so then it's just the actual boots on the ground construction cost. And how much does that go toward, getting whatever percentage subsidized that we want? I think that's kind of the discussion that we have to have.
I was thinking that's our, that we are like a grant because we have the
Yes.
money.
And we'll be
That
able
buy-
to.
that buys
But
us,
we
that buys
also-
us something.
And we'll be able to match, as things move along, we'll be able to match grants with, the value of the land. I mean, so if the
Right.
land is gonna be gifted, then the land's worth,
Right.
X dollars, that can be in kind match.
But
So-
there's also the value of it being shovel ready. And it would be interesting to see if we could, if we could get some data to kind of flush that out in terms of, because it's from a developer's point of view, it's all gonna be able to happen so much quicker and so much more efficiently.
Right.
So there's also, there's value in that.
But again, if we're putting in the land acquisition cost, and ours was very low, so we're essentially saying.
No, but you'd be
We'll
able to.
give you
So
this
it's
half,
acquisition versus.
we'll give
the
you
value of
something
the
worth
land.
$500,000, then that's our equity
Correct.
investment
Yeah.
deal.
Correct, yeah,
Right.
no, so it would be the actual street value of the
Actual
land,
value,
Yeah.
which is gonna be a
Yeah.
lot,
more than
a lot
100.
a lot more than what we paid.
But that's what lets us call the shots and make it economic for.
Yeah,
for
it
the
creates
developer to do
it
their
creates the equity needed to potentially.
Yeah.
Do what we wanna do in a straightforward. kind of direct way where the developer can come in and do what they do, right? And then there's some.
Cause the
back
developer
end-
doesn't have to factor in.
There's some back end agreement that there's gonna be X number of these are gonna be sold at this price point, and here's how it's gonna be managed in terms of the perpetual affordability. Those will be the, like the two kind of, legalese points that get put into it, but you're removing, potentially a lot of other cast of characters that all do what they do well, but that's all they do. They just do their one little thing, right? So if you may be able to speed the whole thing up, by doing it that way.
So they were looking at another job in a town, someplace where a town didn't own land or anything, they'd have a
Right.
big land acquisition cost that would
Correct.
get in the way
Yeah,
of them.
the site control is the site control, and then to have the permitting and a lot of the baseline infrastructure dealt with, I think it's
It's huge,
Worth a
doesn't get
lot.
any better, yeah.
right,
Yeah.
that's ideal.
Was there anything I missed, do you think, Ron?
No, I think that's really good. So I get a sense from Patrick that the capacity work will be together, hopefully in a kind of viewable conceptual report, 3 weeks. We can hope that, with that report at hand, they'll be able to talk to some developers about like, here's where we are. And then that can kind of give the committee some understanding of how the process might work, whether it's what we're talking about now or something a little different. And then, ultimately that can kind of get rolled up into a succinct report that would go to the select board to say, okay, here's the kind of ball of wax as it stands now, and here's some recommendations moving forward, be it the design process, cost, how much time, stuff like that. So we would have a kind of a clear path, a clear view of some of the next steps.
Kevin, that's my report.
So we'll go to the regional plan input.
We were gonna just look at the
We're
option
gonna
deck. now?
push that off to a little bit later.
Okay.
Focus in.
So
There's a lot there.
also the back and forth the emails, some of the development of some of this stuff, and we specifically looked at a few items in the regional plan. One relating to housing, and then two, just some other kind of notable things that we felt should be in there to represent Dorset. And we've actually sent this language over to the BCRC, and my understanding is it's been integrated into the draft that's gonna be reviewed next week.
Right.
So that's kind of the first part. The second part is for the town to look at the plan and think about, are there other things that we should be advocating for? Typically the plan, the plan is really vague, and it's not gonna have a lot of super specific references to each community. But there is space within it to have examples in each. And then I think the other thing is to mention is just kind of a housekeeping or a process question. I was representing that, this plan that's about to get reviewed next week is including some of the Act 181 stuff, and that's not correct. So the plan itself is actually expiring at the end of 24. So they have to update it and approve it to have it actionable so that it's in place. And then shortly after they do that, the end of this year, they're going to go right into integrating Act 181 language into the plan, which is, if you remember, I don't know if it was 1 or 2 meetings ago, we had the chart with the housing unit call outs and all that
Mhm.
stuff. That was from a study that the state had done. And I think I don't know if it's referenced in the statute or how it's working, but they're basically saying, here are requirements around housing units and what the expectation is for this region. And once BCRC gets kind of into that, they're gonna then put that language into the regional plan and then have to have a, another public input process, about, is it good, bad, indifferent? What do people think about it? What does each community think about it? Is Dorset okay with the number of units that's depicted? Is it feasible? Is it not feasible? Can it be lowered? Can it be raised? What if we don't do it? What if the whole region isn't able to do it? What happens there? All that discussion will happen at the RPC, public hearing level. But still for us, it's gonna be important to, just look out for Dorset. Cause part of the next phase of, the Act 181 stuff is that there's gonna be the future land use maps, FLU. And there's gonna be areas in Dorset where those maps may differ from our own zoning maps.
Yeah.
Which is,
Right.
what's gonna happen then,
Yeah.
so, hopefully they don't, hopefully the towns are honored in the fact that, we just overhauled the whole thing and probably spent $30,000 doing it, right?
Right,
It took many
exactly.
years, but Dorset's been very present in it right now, so to have that kind of stomped on, I think is difficult in my mind. And then it just adds another, it's just another layer. And what does that mean? What does that mean for Dorset property owners?
Right.
Like, how do we digest this information and get it out there in a way that, when the decision-making is happening, that we can make sure we're, doing what's best for our community. And I don't know how that's gonna all play out.
Rob, do we know how many like new house permits we've issued in 2024 so far?
I would say probably less than 10,
I think they have that in the
Probably,
report. I
yeah.
was looking at.
probably 5, 6, maybe somewhere in there.
Not many.
No.
And they're all probably $1 million houses. plus.
It varies, but yeah, it's, I think even at the county level, it's below 100,
Wow.
I think,
For the whole county.
for the whole, of new permit, new housing unit permits, the new. I think if you go back in the regional plan had a chart, a graph that was pretty good that showed, pre-2005, it was hundreds. It was probably like between 150 and 250 units a year. And then you can see in that 05 to kind of Great Recession timeframe, it
Right.
plummets. And then I want to say like
It just stays steady.
the
there.
2022 stuff is like 60, somewhere in there, and that's for the county. If I'm reading that chart correctly, I think as this kind of rolls out, we'll
Yeah.
have more understanding about that. And I think that's gonna be I think the Banner had an article today about, North Bennington, looking at that chart and going, where I think I'm not sure what their allocation of units was, but it was somewhere between 50 and 80 per se. And I think their point was, well, where are we gonna put 50 units like that, North Bennington is a small little,
Right.
doesn't cover a lot of
Tiny little
geographic
hamlet,
areas,
right.
so I think, it'll be interesting to see kind of what the reaction is elsewhere.
So that number that supposedly came from the state that we need 25,000 plus new units by 2030. Where did that number specifically come from?
I think the number that gets thrown out a lot recently is from the Vermont Housing and Finance Agency, I believe.
What was that
And I'm
study?
not
they did?
sure how
They did a
they-
statewide housing study.
Well, there's multiple, there's multiple kind of studies out there, but the most recent one that was sanctioned by the state, I'm not sure what the total
I
allocation is.
thought it kind of looked, I thought it came from, because it came out like, within the past 6 months.
I know that there's a VHFA one that says, 25 to 35,000
Yeah.
units on
Yeah.
a certain time frame, but I'm not sure if that's the same as the
Okay,
the
VHFA.
state. Yeah,
What's VHFA?
Vermont Housing and Finance Agency. And the whole thing to me is, again, when we're having dozens and not even hundreds of units, to say
Yeah.
that we need tens of thousands is just silly.
Laughable.
Yeah.
Yes.
It doesn't address the reality. It's not a real, and it doesn't get tied back to, well, why can't we have the X thousand? Well, here's the reason. We're about to see, we're about to go through a however long preliminary and final design are gonna take for, a development, and all the front end costs and yada, yada.
And the activity.
What I was thinking
and
is,
Yeah,
permitting and-
correct, all that stuff.
the Vermont Housing Needs Assessment, 2025 to 29.
Yep, that's the
That is
document that ties back to the regional plan and Act 181 stuff.
Right.
So if there's a call out for total units in that's the one that we should be,
Yeah, I think that's where I was seeing numbers like that.
and that's that chart that I had at one of the recent meetings came from that site. If you recall, it gets really specific, a number of rentals, number
And
of
it's by county, so this is.
number of
yeah.
ADUs, number of single
So-
families, stuff like that, which I'm not sure how they came to all those percentages, but they obviously had some
And
kind
what
of
would the,
benchmark.
trying to figure out what the point would be in terms of how this relates to Dorset? Let's say we go through and they say Dorset should add 100 units. And we do Raptor Lane and we add 110. Does that mean someone down the line at an Act 250 level is now they're gonna look at it and say, actually, no,
No, you don't.
we don't
yeah.
want you to do it because you
Um,
have enough units.
Yes, potentially, Frank, yeah.
Hmm.
This, I sent and I think I sent it to you all, Attorney Barlow's kind of review of
Yeah,
it. If I
yeah.
didn't, I'll send it again, but, there will be competition, essentially. It will, if you're gonna have a maximum, assumption, or if if there's a ceiling on stuff, it'll be used against, once that ceiling is, met or whatever, then you could make an argument that, well, you've exhausted your ability to grow or whatever.
Right.
So, and the example that I think Attorney Barlow gave was more related to commercial stuff, commercial growth, that there would be call outs for a certain amount of commercial growth, and then say, I don't know, there's an industrial park in Manchester, there's an industrial park in Dorset,
Mhm.
kind of whoever gets like the first bite at the apple or gets further along is probably gonna be who gets the chance to do that. And they're gonna say, well, you can't do that because there's one in Dorset.
Even
Which
though
is
you
kind
might
of
have
the-
somebody willing to bring a company and start
Correct,
it.
yeah. And it's definitely like devil's advocate perspective looking at it, but that's typically, I mean, it's
Yeah, I mean,
law of unintended consequences,
Yeah.
right? I
you
mean,
never
that's
know if that's
Although
the
the-
case. I mean, maybe they were
Typically how
forward
the-
enough thinking that they would say more is better. That was sort of the goal,
Right.
but.
No, I think,
no.
if you want more of something and you add more rules to
Mhm.
regulate it, then I don't know that.
You
you're
don't
gonna
want
get
more
of something. So, I think, so there is gonna be a little bit of back and forth. I think that the good news for us is that the BCRC, I think, is receptive to, if the community says, here's what we want,
Right.
and here's how we wanna represent it, that'll get into the document in theory. But then in terms of the mechanics of the state process, then I think that's where we get into some trickiness around, it's another layer of zoning, and what does that really
Right.
mean for Dorset, property owners?
Is there any process that we should be following to get this stuff into or is it just like our representatives, David and Liz? just say,
Ideally,
we-
it's like, planning commissioners, our planning commissioners and the select board should be looking at the document to try to figure out what information that's maybe in our town plan that
Conflicts or whatever.
that conflicts or needs to get trued up, that could then go into an additional
Yeah.
memo that could get passed along.
But you've already integrated this already.
This stuff, yes.
Yeah, so that they just accepted it
Yes.
without saying, have you got the plan commission on board?
My understanding is that, it will be included in the draft.
Okay.
For review this fall, and because it came from me and, the town, they're assuming that we're okay with it.
Yeah, so we just need to make sure whatever we're putting in there is mirrored in our town plan, like we want something about Raptor
Correct,
Lane
yeah.
that should be in the
Yep.
town plan. And then the other thing is, when is that future land use map going to be published?
I believe that there's a 2026 timeframe for them to update the
It's at
town, the regional plans
Yeah,
and deal with those.
the end of 2026 is what this says. But the entire plan has to be updated, which
So
would
2 years.
include that map.
Essentially. When that map, is derived, so that maybe Frank probably knows too, but they're gonna have what they call tier 1, 2, and 3. Not communities, but like areas. And tier 1 being, they're exempt maybe. And then all the way up to tier 3 to being like, hey, no, you can't build here.
Right.
And and they're gonna be using, I assume, like the A&R Atlas to figure out the resource stuff.
And it's my understanding that those tier threes, right now you have a 1 acre town or a 10 acre town or a 10 acre town. But that acreage won't apply anymore. So if you own half a lot in a tier 3 zone and want to do something, you're gonna need an Act 250 permit.
Yeah.
Where before, if you had, here, if it was 10 acres, or if it was Mount Tabor, it's 1 acre, you would avoid Act 250.
No, generally, I think in the rural communities, this is gonna be much
It's
more
gonna be-
restrictive and,
Yeah, much more restrictive and
Yeah.
so.
and it's
So it
not
just
gonna,
doesn't make sense that
Complicated
they're
and
it's not
asking
gonna allow
for
the
more housing
rural
and then
communities to
what's the
grow
point?
the way they've
Right.
grown for 200 years, which
Right.
is unfortunate. They'll say the point is that some of the communities in urban areas and downtowns are gonna get exempted, and that's where everybody should live.
The
And the sacrifice,
bustling downtown Dorset,
um,
we'll have a 18-story apartment building.
and that's assuming it's even tier 1. I mean, we do have a designated
Right.
village center and all that, but
We might
in
not.
most of these downtown areas, they're limited by their utility capacity.
Right.
So there's
Right,
really,
exactly.
so the
There's no-
growth that they're thinking is
No
there
sewage.
isn't
Right,
necessarily.
if you don't have
there.
sewer, you're,
Right.
can't do anything.
Yeah, and without the economies of scale, sewer makes no sense.
Right.
Like that's kind of, that's that double-edged sword. I think recently, actually, I think in that 7 Days article,
yeah.
small community Montgomery is gonna spend $13 million.
Was
for-
that
Putting in
stunning?
For
sewage.
30 units.
What?
users.
That was stunning.
$400,000.
30
a
users?
user.
Yeah. Yeah, 13 million.
And I guess there's gonna lead to some kind of growth, but I'm not sure it's ever gonna,
There's no payback.
Well, no, I mean, they're not paying for the initial investment, so.
Yeah.
But you're gonna have to operate the thing, and it's expensive to operate it.
Yeah,
and,
yeah.
The water system here in East Dorset and Dorset are good examples that they're small, and when you're small, it can be difficult to
Right.
do capital stuff and hard to manage, and
Wow.
and it can be.
Get maintenance, and then the regulations change.
Well,
and
that
you
guy-
need upgrades,
And
and
the fees can be expensive to deal with all that stuff, and you've got a limited number of people paying them, so it just kind of.
I know, I was
Up
shocked
in
at that.
Rutland, they had
30
a
people.
development that had its own water system, and ultimately, everybody just
They bailed.
said they gave
Just
up,
drill
they
their own
bailed,
wells.
drilled their own wells. Cause they had to help work out the receivership of the district,
Mhm.
cause everybody left without even paying all the bills,
But kudos to Montgomery, because they leveraged $1 million that the town agreed to borrow into a $13 million
Yeah.
wastewater system that you gotta believe is gonna be able to support more than 32
Right,
units that may
love to know what
enable
that is.
future, future development. I mean, I'm guessing, I may not,
That's
may not
pretty-
be correct, but that's still pretty cool. $1 million
It's-
and they
it's-
got 13 million from other.
It's cool they're able to do it, it's kinda scary they're able to do
As long as
it.
they're saving money to fix it in 20 years.
Yeah,
Cause somebody's paying for it,
When
do their massive
When it
upgrades,
costs $40 million to,
right,
but
when you're
somebody's-
the
replacing.
numbers around wastewater
Can I
stuff.
see
are-
that?
and somebody's
Crazy.
paying for it,
Correct, yeah, I think
there's
that,
no free money out
I
there.
think
Right.
that's ARPA money from the state. And, yeah,
How big is Montgomery?
not big. It's like 1,000 people.
What?
Wow.
I could be wrong, but it's not.
Where's it located?
32
North.
units.
Like way north.
Like
Kingdom.
Northeast Kingdom?
North Kingdom.
Yeah, like edge of the kingdom
No,
area, I think.
It's just crazy. That's crazy.
Hey, Mike Rice, come on,
Mostly.
get us that kind of money.
Mostly rural.
Work your magic, please.
Yeah. I'm not sure we want to.
No, there was, so the
Oh,
wastewater
sewer
stuff, there
system.
was, yeah, the wastewater stuff, there was lots of money available
not
through the
gonna
ARPA process. Most engineers that I talked to, basically said it doesn't make sense because you don't have that economies of scale.
Mhm.
And yes, you could get a lot of
Correct.
money, but you're gonna get, you're potentially, getting a huge asset, but also a huge liability.
Liability later down the road.
If the, if either the growth or the existing, if there's a lack of economies of scale, basically.
Yeah.
And these are already areas that already have little water systems that are already struggling to get
Yeah.
enough money to, do maintenance on those. Yeah. So I think that's kind of it for the regional plan input, unless there's
So the meeting next week is just to
meeting
talk
next week
about
is just
this
to.
plan, which is
the-
actually going to be amended.
Correct, yep. And then the next steps would be, if you're in that memo, that at some point DCRC reps are gonna wanna sit in and talk to the select board and say, here's the new language, here's what we think it means for Dorset. What do you think? You have additions, deletions, all that stuff.
Rob, do you know who at the VCRC is working on this project?
No. I assume it's a little bit of everybody, probably. Bill and Janet and
Mm.
Jonathan Cooper would be
Yep.
my guess. Yeah, so I think if you read the regional plan and can think of anything else that we should be thinking about Dorset specifically, we can do that.
The plan is online.
Yeah, I
I
can send
had-
a link
Well,
around.
printed out. Like this one, because I'm online,
Oh,
like,
it's-
I don't even know where I am. I
You-
can't tell what.
It is a
section I'm
little
in.
easier if you print it, but it's very beefy. There's a lot of
Yeah.
pages.
It's huge.
Of course it is. Got everything but the kitchen sink in it.
Yeah, like where are you?
But it's all.
Well, if you really
It's
read
the
it though,
biggest comments you've ever
well,
read.
vague and
in
it
your-
like every other section contradicts itself.
Yes.
Oh,
Like
geez.
you'll read this and then 3 paragraphs later, you'll be like, well, that doesn't make sense. Because this just said this, and this is saying no. Like, we want lots of houses, but we want to protect everything. That's like.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Right.
Clear as mud.
Okay. Upper Hollow Lock update.
Sure, so I think the
This is all the same.
the two things on the bottom of the memo are the new information, so the shifting vendors. Manson Engineering Partners, has offered an estimate of 1,800 to 3,000 to continue the preparing permits. The 3K assumes, getting permits, so going to some meetings.
Who are these guys?
That's Chris Panesi and. his group.
Local?
They're Manchester.
Manchester.
Frank lost his job. I'm
So,
sorry.
My heart, it just
I'm
broke.
sorry.
so you have two options, the preparing the technical information for the permit would be closer to 2,000, and then to get through the permitting process would be 1,000.
So as an aside, I did for private homeowners, the first steep slopes project under the new zoning,
Mhm.
which was the last couple zoning meetings. And so it was a little clunky because it was everyone's first time, but we got through it, I felt, fairly easily. And that was, I think, more subjective than this is, and there's only one place for the road.
Yeah, pretty limited.
This is pretty straightforward of why we have to do it this way. So, I think the neighbors will complain, but from the way the board treated this last one, I think it'll be fairly simple to get an actual permit for the driveway.
Frank, can I ask you, when you were looking at it, how in detailed, but if you're, like, where would the house be?
So here, well, it was, yeah, about halfway down, so kind of in this area.
Okay.
A little bit more than halfway. This is very steep. This is ledge.
So it looks incredibly steep.
And then when you get down here, it gets kind of wet.
Right.
So it was about there.
How many backs, because it's so narrow.
Oh, I
how many
think,
backs
I
and
mean,
forths
it
would you
was
have to have?
maybe 4 turns,
Yeah.
3 or 4
three, I
switchbacks.
think,
Can't remember. But it, yeah, it would be a good bit.
And with the ledge on the side, does that mean the switchbacks wouldn't go into the ledge, or you just have to blast to get the road?
Yeah,
There's
there was-
ledge there. You just put it
There's
on.
room to avoid it. I mean, it might be easier if you did some ledge blasting. But I think it can be avoided.
You bring in, so,
Yeah, it was
just bring in.
bring in material.
Build so it'd be cheaper than mine.
Put it on top.
So I mean, I think it's doable technically,
Mhm.
just wouldn't be cheap.
Yeah. No. And if you look at, I mean, if you look at that ortho photo, I mean, you'll see some driveways adjacent to it that aren't super dissimilar.
Mhm.
You know, some of the roads just straight cut across the slope. You know, being older and grandfathered and not being designed for
Oh, I know.
the new rules, they don't.
Yeah, I mean, I think
They
it,
look straight, but they should, under the new rule, they would be very curvy.
I think this one at the top right, you can see that's a little bit wider than what we have to work with, but you can, it's several switchbacks to get up to. Not sure who owns that.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, it's off of Turkey Run, I think.
Oh, right.
And there are definitely worse ones than that in the hollow.
Yeah, that's a pretty good example of what. Kind of how it would look.
Mhm.
So I think my question is there, is it okay to proceed with Mance? And the next step would be to get Frank to send the data over and kind of get them working on the technical stuff. And then, once we get it, then I would confirm it, present it and all that.
Mhm.
So in the minutes, I think we said
We'll reach out to Kit.
something about keeping the lynchers informed. So I think now that a new, maybe just start an email chain, that
Mhm.
just says, just so you know, the select board has chosen a new engineering firm and we are hiring them to,
Do the
if
technical
that's
work.
the will of the board, to
Mhm.
hire them to,
I'll make a motion to hire Mance Engineering to provide
a
The-
design.
prepare, the work to prepare permits. Is that at this point, we aren't really,
I think the idea at this point is to do all the technical review work and then,
Right.
make a decision about whether to file for permits at a
Mhm.
later date.
okay, so I'll make a motion to hire Mance Engineering to do the permit technical, prepare the permit technical information for that location.
I'll second.
All in favor?
I,
And then meanwhile, I assume you're gonna follow up with Kit. just to
Yeah, the
get
bottom
what's going on
paragraph,
there.
kind of passing ships in the night a little bit,
Mhm.
in terms of a couple of voicemails traded and a couple of emails traded. And we'll hopefully sit down at some point. I do know that the way that Dorset Hollow Corp is structured, that any kind of a transfer probably is not something that would happen soon. Because in order to divest of land, all the decision makers from the entity need to sign off on it.
Mhm.
And I think they're in the process of figuring out who all they
Who
are.
the
Yeah, so
people-
this whole lot here
More than a couple.
has no houses on it. It's
That's
really
current.
buildable, right?
At current, there's no houses on it. It's
Very
29 acres. As you go along the skinny portion
Mhm.
toward the end of Upper Hollow Road, I would venture to guess that there may be small locations in there above the river that might be buildable.
Mhm.
But that's just a guess. I mean, I don't know. Generally, you're gonna have floodplain stuff in there.
Right, exactly.
This lot, 17.1,
Mhm.
that was permitted last year for a house.
Was,
Yep.
And yeah, it's kind of in here. I think there is someone could build something fairly close to the road.
And we'll call it the easterly border. That is the actual
The river.
Meadowy River.
Yep. Um. So, yeah, so we didn't, there's no clear, ask, no clear. This is what Dorset Hollow Corp was thinking. And then there's not a clear time frame other than it's probably not something short term.
Right.
Right.
And
But I
is,
think
is there,
We'll
just-
follow up to get a better understanding of what they're thinking. If they're
Exactly.
thinking, hey, we're gonna give it to the town and
Mhm.
I was just
this is when
curious.
it would happen.
I don't really see this making sense necessarily. And maybe I just don't know enough about the whole situation, but I'm sort of like,
I think the argument, from the Lynches was to connect the two and that you could have some kind of green space. I think is what they're,
So
Okay.
apparently there is a path that they've been putting in that goes down along the river and people use that path
Mhm.
either for biking or walking, depending on the weather and the amount of brush. But the people that are in the hollow have been working on this path in different, I think maybe Andy DeVries or someone, but there
this-
are paths that people take, and so they're,
but the piece of property we own right now doesn't really accomplish anything
no,
for that
unless
piece of property.
instead of where people are entering is through the Lynch property. And then if you made a trail up
Right. You
through ours, you could do a
could make
loop.
a little
So
loop.
that was the concept.
no, the Dorset Hollow Corp property has more recreational.
That-
value than the 10 acres we have.
That's
Mhm.
what I'm thinking. The 10 acres adds almost nothing to
Yeah.
what's already there.
Right.
Yeah.
It's just
Continue a trail
access
or
to the
just-
road from the far corner,
Hmm.
basically,
But what, that's,
and very steep.
Right, no, it's agreed.
Is there any
So I'll-
continuation of this supposed path
Right.
to
does that keep
where
going?
it goes under the road there by McEnany's house? Is there? No,
Not that I'm, nothing.
I mean, that's what would make sense if it would continued
Follow
down
the.
and then got back to the road and you could,
You could make that loop.
that's a
yeah.
real loop. Or even this
Um,
way.
Okay, so you're talking about getting back to like Paddock Farm?
Yeah,
Area?
yeah,
Okay, yeah,
yeah.
no, I'm not aware of
You mean
anything.
connecting on this road.
Yep.
Right.
Yeah, because down here, I don't know how far down it is.
No, I mean, it's all, everything to the kind of southwest is all private property. So there may be people walking on it, but that doesn't mean that the town's gonna be able to just
Yep.
buy it instead of walking on it.
Yep.
Um,
Yep. Okay,
if
well,
it's off
that's,
the property.
that's another.
But
We
I
looked
will-
into it.
said we were gonna reach
Right,
out to
yeah.
Kit and
We did,
talk to her,
yeah,
and
I will
I think
follow
we
up
should just
with,
find out what the situation is so that we're well versed in
Yeah,
it.
Yep.
That's
So it's
what
the-
we guess.
Yes.
And yeah, in Asheville, I know, it's crazy.
So I'll do that and then I will follow up with Mance and follow up with the Lynches as well.
Thank you.
Old business?
Yep.
New business, okay, town office, we talked about, Chanticleer.
Oh my
Um,
God, I drove by that.
demo
so
is
quick.
done.
Wow.
Man.
The demo will continue.
I haven't driven by, is it
Septic-
already?
Oh, it's
At
gone.
the big,
Wow.
is the
Septic tanks
pile
gotta get
still there?
filled
Oh,
in.
maybe the pile's still there. There's some concrete still there,
I
but
couldn't
just
believe the
concrete,
pile.
yeah.
the
was
building is
mountain
just,
of-
None of the.
oh, the
building.
pile's gone.
The pile's gone.
Yeah,
It's amazing, I was just
the
there like
building's gone.
2 weeks
it's
ago
just
with my dog
concrete.
going up to Aeolus.
It's gone.
Yeah, two 40,000 pound excavators. so
They make quick work.
Pretty bird. So there's quite a bit more of kind of the demo process that's gotta get dealt with, and that'll roll out over the next few weeks here.
Hopefully Michelle and Melanie are out of town and didn't have to.
I do not know.
Hmm, Yeah, right.
But, you know, they,
Were all the buildings demolished?
yes,
There's a couple of side, yeah.
Yep.
Okay.
yeah, that was required.
Yep.
Yeah, so as next step, we get everything remediated, the well's gotta get filled in, cut, capped, septic filled in, crushed, parking lot has to go away. Everything reseeded, and then, we have to follow up with like a planting plan
Mm.
for, I guess some wetland plants of some sort, even though it's not a wetland. Adjacent to a wetland, but it's not in a darn wetland. It's not in a mapped wetland anyway.
And yet,
Well, we're just glad you're reading the fine print.
Yeah, so funny story, the state has actually changed this process to where now Vermont Emergency Management does this GC stuff that the town's doing of the demo process.
Huh.
Because towns are basically saying like, you're crazy, this is too difficult. We don't have the capacity to do it, so now between the vast increase in buyout applications because of the storms the last 2
Mhm.
years, there's I think around 275 buyouts like pending statewide. So the Vermont Emergency Management is gonna, essentially like give you a grant that will allow them to do all the stuff that we're doing. So we're, I think unfortunately, like one of the last towns that's actually gonna have to do it the old way. But so far, so good. We got pictures, there's follow-up stuff, so, we'll see what happens. Yeah, and I think one of the, only other thing, there's a wildflower mix that's gonna get thrown out there that hopefully will look pretty, and the idea is to then mow it, probably once a year, kind of moving it forward. Let's see, speeding, so we got quite a few complaints, specific to Mad Tom Road, so Jason spent a lot of time the last couple of weeks kind of hanging out, during the apple orchard season. And I think that we've done a pretty good job around trying to manage and mitigate that. And we'll move on to the next place, which I think is Dorset West Road or Dorset Hollow Road, the Dandy Mountain. You can kind of pick your spot.
You got somebody on Damien Mountain just a couple of weeks ago,
Yeah, no, that's,
right in front of my house,
that's the idea.
bright and early in the morning too.
Short-term rentals, at this point, we have 15 registered. And the first round of letters went out a few weeks ago, so we're just it'll be kind of a slow, I think, sleepy process for those first 3 letters to go out, and then we'll have a list of, okay, here's the ones that haven't responded that are on the list, and then we can start to, the town will send its own letters, we make phone calls, stuff like that. And I think that the software is a really useful tool.
is it? Just thinking about getting the word out about this, about other things. Do we ever put, like, I don't know, an informational poster when it's voting? I just think we've got this opportunity coming up
Mhm.
where a lot of people are gonna be voting. Is there any town items we'd like to just have front and center, like, hey, here's short-term rental? Or, working on Raptor Lane might be a different time.
Yeah.
Just thinking of something we could put in front of people
Yeah.
who are sort of a
That's
captive audience.
Not a bad idea at all.
Be
particularly
aware,
About
yeah.
short-term rentals.
Right,
Like, have you registered? If
Ex-
you own a
right,
short-term rental,
Yeah,
have
something
you
like that.
registered with the town?
And
I just, I assume that wouldn't interfere with
I
the
can check,
process of
yeah, I
voting.
mean, I think as long as there's nothing like article
Political about
related or political, yeah.
Yeah.
I think it's fine. If it's just informational, here's a regulation we have that's new.
Right.
Yeah, no, I think that's a great idea.
Yeah.
Yeah, we can definitely come up with something.
Mhm.
And I think we've already got like 20% have already voted
Oh, really?
because of the mail-in ballots.
Wow.
So,
Wow.
that's less to go to the
Well,
polls, but the last general election, I think we had a gargantuan participation rate. I think it's like,
72,
no, it was higher than that.
Wow.
was it?
Yeah, like 80,
Was amazing.
yeah, it was a lot. So to your point, Frank, there's gonna be hundreds more that will participate now than don't usually, so. Yep, we can definitely do that. I think that's
So Rob, I had
all I have for.
the one thing, I asked Rob I'm on the Southern Line
Yeah.
Communication Union District Board. And it was the 2 of us was, I was the rep and Bob Mazzaros was the alternate. Now Bob's moved or moving, whatever.
Moved.
moved.
Got it. Yeah.
So, we don't have a backup person. I've got a conflict on the next meeting. Ask Rob to attend, just because they're looking at starting to put together the annual report and all that. We don't, I just kind of want to put the word out. It'd be good to have a second person. And that could potentially be the town manager, but I don't want to necessarily lay it on him.
Right.
But just kind of keeping in mind if anybody knows of anyone who might have some interest. It's not a,
Which board is this?
you know, this is the Communication Union District, so
Mhm.
that's the entity that got the broadband in for everybody, the fiber.
Fiber.
And the fiber's in, it isn't a lot of a job. I was stupid enough to hold up my hand, so I'm supposed to be helping actually do something with it, but, cause it needs to get a federal single audit because of, you know, we got $8 million of grant money from the government. But, for the most part, it's a very low, you know, not doing a lot, but just making sure that, you know, somebody's aware of what's going on.
Yeah, yep, and I think, I mean, the other point.
And it's town by town, it is a municipal entity unto
Yeah.
itself.
And it has, right now anyway, I mean, Jim, so you know, I think, when was it, February? It gets really windy and snowy in February, right? So,
Yeah, that would be Vermont.
my fiber comes in aerial, and it's a ways from the street to my house. And a tree had gone right through the thing, and I called, and, they told me it was gonna be basically 5 weeks before somebody could get there. It's like, you know, I work from home sometimes, my wife runs her business from home sometimes. It's like, I mean, I can't wait
Right.
5 weeks
Yeah,
for
that's
a
insane.
technical help, and the CED was able to get like a contact and get response.
Yeah.
Pretty quickly. So there is a useful
So that's consistently been the
interface
case.
ability that the CUD has, especially right now with the, you know, fiber just getting done and it's still being new and then chasing customers and all that stuff. I think it definitely is.
But it's in general,
Useful.
you know, cause we have a contractual arrangement with Consolidated and, you know, and we have specific people who interface, you know, they're doing a lot of the grunt work that we need to do to provide reports and all that to the state and different entities. So there's an ongoing relationship that's gonna be going on for another 8 or 10 years at least.
Yeah.
And then it goes beyond
Which is
that.
really helpful because you know, the customer service end is somewhere else and they don't know. you
But
know,
they
so-
will, but
But it
if,
gives us another avenue for.
if,
for
you know,
customer
right
service.
now it's Terry Dorsey from Manchester is the chair, and if I talk to Terry and say, Terry, we've got a problem here with interrupts. You know, they just gotta get on it. He gives a call, and they say, okay, fine, they call, it happens,
Yeah.
you know.
Mhm.
So how big is the group? Is it Dorset and Manchester or?
No, it's all the Bennington
Bennington
County,
County.
It's all Bennington
Yeah.
County.
so they're reps from, you know, yeah, basically just about all the towns.
Yeah.
And a little beyond, but, and we have, you know, it's like fiber optic is available to every address in Bennington County, with the exception of, we've got a list of like a dozen
It's incredible.
locations
It's
that,
incredible.
and we're, you know, trying to just figure out you know, is there anything we could do for that last dozen?
Mhm.
So that's, you know, we were one of the first to actually get it done. And, you know, it's just, it's worth us.
Yeah, I'm happy to sit in on those meetings until we either appoint me as an alternate or find somebody else.
Do you want to do new business now or do you want to do finance? Maybe we do finance first. Henry?
Sure.
Delinquent taxes year over year, you can see it, the FY 25 stuff. Is gonna look a little wonky because the FEMA buyout stuff, revenue and expense is gonna run through the ledger. So, you know, our budget is 2.8 million and we have an additional 1.2 million that has been, you know, spent out of it. So I will, when I report on it, try to back that stuff out so you get a sense of what it actually is. I think as far as the rest of the stuff through the year, I think we're doing all right. There's not a whole bunch to really report on expense wise last month. I think Jim had mentioned the single audit, so it's part of the town's process. The fire district actually is the entity that had to file for a single audit for FY '24. But now the town, because of the FEMA buyout money by itself, will trigger a single audit. So, which is not a huge deal. Just it'll make the external audit cost a little bit more, and then there's kind of a reporting thing that has to happen. That sounds really scary, but ultimately it's not too bad. It's just a couple of steps for us to file and do stuff. So, just something else to kind of keep you aware of. All I got.
Any
Motion.
questions?
Motion to approve the finance report as presented.
A second?
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
So let's see, paving, we're not done yet. Morse Hill is done, the actual road itself, but we have a lot of follow-up work, related to paving some aprons, and some kind of approaches into both driveways and private roads. And then also doing, a bunch of stuff in Dorset Village. So hopefully that's gonna be happening in the next couple of weeks. The vendors in Manchester right now. If you drive McNamara, you can see a bunch of work that we did related to the clean water grant that we got, where the roads, essentially the prism is much wider. And we've got a bunch of trees and added a bunch of drainage stone. Let's see.
Was Route 30 painted, striped, fresh?
Yeah, it must have been, because the cones were up.
At some
Oh.
point, yeah.
It looked really like all of a sudden.
All of a sudden, you could see where the lanes were.
Yeah.
It's always very handy.
Okay,
at night.
no.
Yeah, they typically do that stuff in the fall. After
Okay.
all the paving stuff is done.
The fall once every 10 years. This-
No, it's every year.
Is it
It's
really
every year.
every
The
year?
stuff fades so quick because it's not, they're not allowed to use anything like chemically significant that would make it last a long time.
Yeah.
So it tends to
Rub off every
wear
year.
off really quickly. So the fire district continues to kind of work through their process. The good news is that they will work into 25 with at least another probably 30 service lines that'll get replaced. And they're also working on trying to get approval from V-Trans to do a bunch of there's a bunch of lines that have been replaced up to the edge of Route 30. And we would be going back to try to do from the edge of Route 30 to the main under Route 30. And it's gotta be, done in such a way that the state's gonna be okay with the way the paving ends up. So we'll see how that works out, but that could add another 50 kind of work locations to the work. And this is, the district's pushing because all of this work is still gonna be attributed to the funding cycle from a few years ago, and it still has grants and subsidies attached to it. So the more of this work we do, the more we're able to draw down those grants and subsidies. So we're trying not to leave any money on the table. As far as the well on Cheney Road, it's been built, which is great. The early pump testing has been really good. I think the permit testing is gonna be around 100 gallons a minute.
Oh, wow.
The quality has been really great. But in November, we will pump test. They will monitor neighboring wells. Some neighbors that get letters to say, hey, if you want us to monitor your well, we'll come by, drop a transducer in the well sleeve and monitor it. So then when that's done, hopefully by the end of the year, the town or the fire district has potentially a draft permit for the new source. The pipe to connect the source is already in the ground. It was done as part of the project that has been the last 2 summers. And the district would have to make a decision around, depending on the operations kind of requirements and any kind of treatment. The hope is that right now it looks like the only treatment it's going to need is going to be chlorination, which is the same as the springs. So the hope is that sometime, in the spring or early summer, the district's going to be able to build the little treatment facility with the pump station and all that on the site, and then connect to the street. And then at some point, hopefully next summer, the state's going to give us a piece of paper that says you have, enough water to add people. And the list of people is up to, I think it's 14. And that's people that own land that could subdivide and build. And people that want to add a bedroom, people that want to change a use, people, they're all right now waiting because they can't get a wastewater permit. So it'll be a big step in the right direction.
How far up does the water system go up the Holland?
It goes to what used to be the Meacham House. It's the blue house. It's kind of contemporary on the left-hand side before the Eschers. Not quite to the Eschers.
Mm-hmm, okay.
So it's about a quarter mile, I think. Yeah, so that's it. That's a really good, it's been a few years to come, but hopefully, by the end of the year, they'll definitely know about the quality and the quantity and the permit. So once they have that in hand, then it's kind of just a process from there forward, which is great. And what else can I share about? So they, another piece that the well work is half funded by a grant, which is great. And then that saves about $90,000. And then the way that they structured the meters are going to start to go into everybody's house for the first time, house and business. And the way that they structured the meter contract, we actually pulled it out of the big contract because the engineer thought it would be it would be better to use a different vendor. They turned out to be right, and that saved around $165,000. So it was a good call by Otter Creek. They've done, and then the work that was done under the current contract, which took 2 seasons, is it's a little bit less than $1 million under budget. So that's why we're trying to look at Route 30 and some other stuff and try to move that money over to other places so that we can use it, which is great. So they're doing I think a really good job. It sometimes doesn't feel like it, but you can't rebuild the whole system in a couple of years until it works. Trying to get to stuff that we didn't talk about. Yeah, there's not a ton of stuff there unless there's questions. I mean, the league annual meeting, I think, went really well. Jim Cantori was the keynote speaker, so there was a ton of people, more than usually. There's like 100, maybe 150, a couple hundred. There were like 500 or 600 people there. Crazy.
Jim Cantori.
Yeah, he's from St. Johnsbury.
Weather guy.
The weather guy?
The weather guy,
Oh,
yeah.
no
I'm
kidding.
pretty sure he's from the St. J area, so they got him to be the keynote, and a lot of people came.
Go Ted.
Yeah, no, Ted's awesome. So, yeah, I think that's everything else we kind of talked about.
Why don't we send those bills around, and then I know Henry had a new business item he wanted to bring up.
Yeah, I just wanted to, so as we move forward with this housing project, we're starting to consider some significant spending. And I see the spending in the 2 major tranches. The first is what it'll cost to design the infrastructure for this project, and then the second is obviously the building of that infrastructure, and then actually the third would be the building of homes. And I, when I extrapolate those numbers, I mean, say we do, if we did 100 units, that's a $50 million project.
Hmm.
And it's like, whoa, this is little Dorset. But wouldn't that be cool if we could pull off a $50 million project? But that would require spending whatever it's going to cost to put in this infrastructure. So, and that, I don't know, I've heard numbers thrown around of $3 to $5 million.
It's probably too early to really have a real sense of what that looks like. I think when the design stuff, I mean, millions. Because of it.
And then, but even before that, we need to spend some money with Enman and Kesselring to design it. So I think we should start thinking about identifying, if this is really going to happen, we need at least to have, is this realistic? Can we really pull this off? And in my mind, the local options tax is a key part of enabling the funding to pull this off. So I think we should start looking seriously at the process of beginning a local options tax. What do we want to do locally, politically, with all of our constituencies, and then legally, what do we need to do to make it happen? I mean, basically, it's get the town to approve it, and then basically the legislature needs to approve that.
So the one thing that the league successfully did last year, my understanding is that they got some legislation passed that allows other communities to, because other communities already have the local option tax, so it doesn't have to go to the legislature charter process. Now
okay.
the towns are able to adopt it, and then there's a process and a time frame which I could get more information about, but it's not 100%. It's not dependent upon being passed into legislation.
So my only purpose tonight is to just get a sense of the board. Is this something we want to research? And should we ask Rob to start getting us more information on what that process is, and then start really thinking about putting a local options tax in?
Personally, I think, when you have, if this were, oh, we're gonna do it to build the path, then that would not fly. When you're doing it something like housing, which is, I think, a lot of people could get behind a lot of different, projects. But this is just significant, and I think, enough of the town is we're definitely gonna have some people who are worried about adding anything to town. But I think, so many people recognize it as fundamental importance for just kind of keeping this area viable, I think housing would sell, and with a the key to, if we're doing the local option tax just to ease taxes or something like that. I think then it could still sell, but it's this is something that a lot of people are going to get behind. I think actually doing something about housing. So I think it personally, I think it sells pretty well, and from my perspective, I'd be supportive of it, because I think it is, housing is a huge problem. And, actually having towns, and we're not the only ones, like you said, step up to actually, accomplish something on it. People have been talking about it for a long time, but you actually have some plans that start potentially moving forward. And I think people would appreciate the fact that we're not asking them to pony up. We're gonna, spread it across the tax base.
I think it's the potential for it to be a net neutral to the, for the most part, like to the property taxpayers.
Yeah.
Right.
Certainly the business owners may have a,
Mhm.
different interactions with it, but again, if you tie the discussion back to housing, it seems like a pretty linear and pretty easy to
And
follow.
it's not just housing in general, but we've got.
Yep.
An actual project. So
Not
this is-
theoretical.
Yeah,
This
yeah,
is
no,
what
it's-
we're working on.
It's, yeah, yep, you can point directly to a project.
I
I
think.
mean, I do think, oh, go ahead, Frank.
Oh, I don't know where I stand just yet. I think I'm in favor of it. I think it'll, our rollout of how we announce this to people would be important.
Yeah.
And, one thing I think Rob has done such a great job on, we hear it every week, is these matching grants and how we're getting funds. And I don't know that anybody knows that except us. So I would think pairing that together, be like, yes, we want to use this money, but oh, by the way, we got this for this and this for this and this for this, and we're trying to leverage all that. Would be
Yeah,
helpful in
and-
terms of a,
Specific to the housing issue, in 24, there was quite a bit of money. There was a USDA grant. I think I might have mentioned this in a previous meeting, but there's one of the USDA grants that we got for the water system work was, I think, $500,000. And they have other programs kind of through the same entity. And I'm not sure where the money is actually, it's inflation reduction stuff or ARPA or whatever, but they had something like $65 million available for kind of like what they call catalyst projects, which is what we're talking about. It's the infrastructure stuff that's needed
it's a good word.
to be able to do housing or to do.
You got
community
folks like
projects.
Northern Borders and
That's-
all these.
Yeah, that's essentially, that's what I'm talking about.
Okay.
And that's, I don't know, that's a crazy amount of money that's just not, it's not normal. It's not gonna be there forever. My hope is that we may get another couple cycles out of it. Just because it's, I think, they had 64, 65. I don't know that they gave out full 30, I think that they're not giving it all out. So that means it'll carry forward
But now we're getting
a little bit.
some places start to do something, but more at the state level, we're getting 200-page reports. Studies
And more regulation.
and more regulations, but
Does
actually
Instead of
getting
letting them
something
do
done,
stuff.
it's
Yeah.
it's just like in a way they talked about broadband for years, then it was like
Until you had the money.
you had the
couldn't do it.
perfect
Yeah.
situation and got it done in next to no time.
Right. Because you had the money.
Which they, because we had the money to leverage.
Does Manchester have elections? Actually,
Yep. Yeah, Manchester is one of the oldest, the early, so when the Act 60 first went in, this was a way to kind of defray the trauma. I mean, defray the new system was that the sending communities were allowed to institute a local option tax. That is now morphed into a lot of whatever, sending, receiving, anybody, is lots of people have instituted it. But you had to get the legislature to approve it or whatever, so, but Dorset's one of the original communities that was eligible to have it to begin with, way back in like the late 90s. And obviously Manchester's numbers are very different because of the commercial, and the commercial activity that they have. The numbers are very different, but they're a much bigger community.
But they also consider that just a part of their normal budget. Isn't it?
Yeah, now that goes into a, I don't know if they call it the tax stabilization fund or if it goes into, I know it doesn't go right into the annual budget. It goes into a fund that they then pull from to defray taxes in general.
But they're totally dependent upon it for,
Yeah.
essentially.
Yeah, I mean, they've, I think it's a couple $1 million that it brings in and.
Certainly not a special
year.
purpose.
Yeah, I'd be worried about creep of this.
Yep.
Of saying, we're doing it for housing, and then do we want to impose an end date on it or an end goal to it, not a date? And is some future board gonna say, yeah, well, you know what, this money's really great, let's,
Yeah, I think we'll have to ask Attorney Barlow for specifics around earmarking stuff, I do know that there may be some questions, or can you tie the hands of a future
Right.
board or
But if we-
future voters? So there, yeah, when we get into this, I can have them put together a
Mhm.
memo on, here's the whole process, here's what you need to do, here's what you can do, here's what you probably can't do, all that stuff.
But as suggested here, if it ended up being, we need to put money into infrastructure to make the
You
whole thing
could
work,
You could float.
then it's,
on-
we're doing it for 30 years, you know, it's in place because it should meant this is gonna cover debt service for a
Correct.
30-year bond.
If it's gonna be neutral, yeah.
Right, and
Right.
you know, I
Hmm.
just to put this out there, because we're on the select board and everybody volunteers on different committees, and so things like housing and all of that are at the top of our minds, but there are a lot of residents that they don't care or know if we need housing or not. They just live here. They know that Montpelier's just come down with taxes on just about everything. So I think we need to be very mindful and eyes wide open about that thought, about just slapping on another tax.
Right.
And then now
Mhm,
we're gonna,
mhm.
oh, well, we're
Yeah.
gonna do this great thing, and it's not gonna benefit you, but it will benefit some people in town, and then we're gonna have it
But
there
people-
forever, and
Yeah.
I
People
just,
need to start under, you know, yeah, I think you're absolutely right. At the same time, that to some extent is just, you know, is just keeping the blinders on it because, you know, around here, everything from, you know, fundamental services, you know, from, you know, teachers and firemen and, you know, policemen and.
yeah,
you know,
if in
everything.
fact we can
Right.
say that the housing is only gonna go to those people, I mean, there are all these arguments to be made, because if you're actually, and I just say this because we will hear people say that, they're not
Well.
all looking at the big
Mhm.
picture.
We
And
had.
one of those
It's
things-
absolutely crucial that the marketing and the messaging, in a way, it's a
Right.
big
The
branding
rollout
project
is huge.
for the whole thing, because we have to just be
Right.
mindful and careful that we've got a big story to tell, and it has to kind of be sequenced in the right way.
You do.
But I think
But if we
also
remember,
it's-
we had, and we've got to remember, we had one of those public input sessions where there was the extremely questionable input that came with the like, well, why do we care about those people sort of thing.
Right.
That was,
Mhm.
you know, and
Sorry, don't
there are
remember which
people, this is, we had input from a lot of,
Was that when we were talking about short-term rentals? Is that-
no, I think it was before that, it was well before that, it was. This, I gotta think back to when what it was
Well,
exactly.
at any rate,
But
my
we had-
point is simply that you have to, like, one thing is, do we need to know more about this? Yeah, we absolutely need to know more about it and how it would work. Are we definitely gonna do it? I don't know. We also need to know what this housing plan is gonna look like. And how much would the town be spending on it? And how would we limit that? Because if it's going to be workforce housing, what's not to stop 5 people from saying, hey, I want a house for my kid because they can't afford a house, so they're gonna go in and buy that house. Are we having restrictions? And if other people are able to buy those houses, then are we taxing everyone to subsidize somebody else buying a house for their kids? So there's a lot of
Right.
things that you have to look at all those other sides besides the sort of altruistic, what the aspirational goal is. And I think if all those pieces come together, then you can have a good argument for this. But I do think we need to be mindful that there are a lot of people in town that really don't care because it just doesn't affect them in
They
their
don't know that it affects
everyday
them.
life.
But I mean, I
But
think the mechanics of it, though, like, I mean, you go to Barrow's house and eat dinner,
Mhm.
you're gonna pay 1% more.
Right.
And that's gonna go into a fund to.
Right.
Help
Yep.
do housing or whatever, so that's kind of it, like, how's it gonna?
But
affect
that's why
me?
it needs to kind of be presented as, you know, I think one, and we, you know, it's, I'm looking at this as, this is a solution to. How can we, you know, we should be telling people, okay, we are working on housing and make them aware why they should care about it. And then, okay, we're working on it and that could require some investment. And we have a way to potentially pay for that,
And you
you
can
know,
remind
present
them
it as,
when
you
they
know,
eat dinner in Manchester,
They're already
that
paying it.
1% is
Right,
paid.
you're already paying it.
There's no, there's.
We don't
probably
get it back.
Little benefit,
And
little
it's
direct
not-
benefit to them.
And it's a burden that's not shared just by Dorset residents.
Yeah,
You
that's.
know, that's the big selling
Part of
point.
the, you know, the lodging and the short-term rental stuff is that's kind of tapping into that part of economy that probably is impacting the real estate, right? I mean, people come, they visit, they fall in love with Dorset, they buy property, they have, you know, city money, and city money goes a long ways in a rural community, which in turn, you know, raises values, and yada, yada, yada.
But I think that, you know, you're absolutely right, but to some extent, I think we've been focusing on housing because we do recognize that it's extremely important to these communities. And I think to some extent, this is the great opportunity to come out and say, okay, you know, by the way, the select board has had, you know, as its, you know, sort of top side project has been housing for a while now.
Jim, how many kids at Dorset School aren't Dorset residents, you know?
Right now, 44,
Out of
100 and,
75?
yes.
Pretty high percentage.
I thought you had to be a Dorset resident, or not
No.
since they, there's combined.
No, we're Taconic and Green, and we, you know, for one, only that's, I should make you aware that, you know, we're sort of ruffling a lot of feathers, and we're gonna have on the 29th a meeting at the Dorset School. Because we're looking at restructuring things, because right now we have Dorset, Manchester, and Floodbrook are the middle schools. But when we came together as Taconic and Green with 5 schools and all, you know, so as middle schools, you know, that all came together, and then we send all the kids from, you know, Courier and Sunderland, to middle school there. We're looking at totally redoing middle school. That's what's causing all the flap now, but we also, when we had that, you know, started to come with kids, you know, crossing borders and stuff like that. We said, okay, we're gonna open it up, so if you're, you know, Sunderland kids, they get, you know, their main school is MEMS, but even if you're in 3rd grade and you're a Sunderland parent, you say, I have some reason to say, I'd like my kid to go to the Dorset school. You can apply, and if there's room, there's
And
a
that's the-
lottery to
so-
allow it to happen.
That's my point, is that if there were 44 Dorset kids, more Dorset kids, you wouldn't have 44 kids from the other communities in the school.
Exactly.
Right? That's,
Yeah.
So our school population is down, right? I mean, I think that's
Yep.
kind of the.
We're down, we just had, you know, we had a meeting. We're having a whole series of meetings. We had one today with the teachers at MEMS. And you look at our population, and it is, you know, we had consistently been over 1,000, and now we're down at 840 or whatever.
For the whole
We're-
SU
Yeah,
tuition, I mean, for the whole student body?
well, that's for K to 8,
1,300, right,
K to 8, because
kind of
we're across the whole
Right.
BRC, we're 2,700 kids, but, you know,
Yeah.
we've got, but it's, you know, that's for K to 8, not
in
including
the schools
pre-K.
that we operate, yeah.
Well, my purpose in bringing this up is because we're speaking hypothetically about
Correct.
all this work, and we have a housing committee that's doing all this work. And we've developed a model that maybe will work, but it is all dependent on being able to
Having
come
money
up
to
with
do it.
millions of dollars
Resource.
to pay for this infrastructure. So if we're not going to do, you know, to get this funding in this way, I'm not sure what other way we should do, but then, you know, we should be kind of folding up our tents on housing.
And that's a good place to present it as, you know, here's the project, we think it's worthwhile. And we think we got a way to pay for it, but, you know, okay, so
Hmm.
take that off your plate
Yeah.
as far as a complaint, sort of, but, you know.
there's a term in housing development called the funding stack.
Yep.
And we've seen some of it, these incredibly complicated, you know, combinations of ways, and so I think what Henry is saying is, it's not the answer, it's not the only driver, but it could be a really, really compelling good piece to the overall puzzle.
Yep.
So I think it would be great to explore it further,
Well, I
knowing
think
that this is the beginning of a feasibility, I mean, this is
what
the beginning of a whole discovery.
we as a town
Phase.
have is, what's hugely valuable, we, you know, have sitting in our pocket right now is all that land.
Right.
And that is a huge value that lets us start to do this. But there are other people, if we want to make ourselves even more competitive on getting something really done the way we want to, then you add the infrastructure
Yeah,
too.
yeah.
And then
Right.
people are knocking on the door to try to work with
Yeah,
you
you have
on a relative basis. So, being able to do both of those things, that's when you start to be able to,
potential
dictate
for it to be
terms.
done more quickly, you know, arises versus if it was all, if the developer kind of owned
Right,
all
they're
the
gonna
land.
roll their
Now,
eyes and
it would
goes,
get
"No."
slowly developed over years typically, and the house goes in.
We
the house
lose
But if
goes
we
control over
honestly,
what it
if we
looks
didn't
like.
think we could sell, the people of Dorset on housing being a smart thing, then we probably shouldn't be spending all this effort.
Yeah.
Well, I think we should absolutely look into it. And I think ultimately, the rollout matters. And there are people who don't understand yet that housing is important, and it'll be our job to help them understand that. Yeah, just because they don't know about it isn't a reason not to do it.
Mhm.
And we
So
gotta
I think
recognize-
that'll be the,
You had a
you
town
know-
meeting article too, that kind of like advisory to create the.
Yeah.
oh, right,
Too.
Mhm.
It's
yes,
not, I mean,
right, it's not a.
We have to
total
realize-
You can't, people don't show up to town meeting and participate, you can't
Like what I,
do everything for them.
I said with the school, where, this doing the middle school and then having to do a restructuring overall. We're going town by town, school by school, essentially having people yell at us for a while. Right now, because, you present something that would be significant change, people get pissed off.
Well,
And they have some really good input,
and there's,
but that's where you start to. figure-
unlike that, we have some nice, fairly easy answers, I think, in our, versus the school
Right.
issue, I think there's
Mhm.
less good answers, I think, as part of the.
Yeah.
Right.
Mhm.
Well, we
without-
don't,
Without large changes or what is viewed as sacrifices and stuff, I think that's, I don't think they're yelling at the board, I think.
Right, we just need to drill
Yelling at the
wells and build some
situation.
roads and that's.
Yeah. No, what we found for everyone, we've had Sunderland, Manchester, and the teachers so far, and in each case, it's. We have in mind something that we think is important to improve the quality of education for kids. But to accomplish that, there's gonna be some change that people aren't gonna like. And, they focus totally on that, and they don't wanna focus so much on where we say, we're not doing middle school as well as we should, we really need to fix it. And they're like, okay, yeah, whatever, but what are you doing to us over here? And it's, so it comes down to, can we convince communities that there's a plus to this plan as well as, potential negatives?
Yeah.
And if we can't,
The
we
status
just-
quo is, few kids in small schools, and it's gonna be very expensive to operate it. That's the,
Which is why the
Yep.
consolidation effort.
and then you get
starts
the,
first.
the results to
Right.
taxes and stuff.
That was a big part of it, but when you consolidated governance and you made it really hard to shut schools.
Mhm.
But, our problem is really that, we've got 3 different middle schools that are all too small to really do middle school well.
Hmm.
And we've been talking,
But
they've
there's
been
been
talking
talk for
since,
years about having. a
since
consolidation
2007, they've been talking about doing something as far as.
Mhm.
Now we're
It'd be good
saying,
for the
let's
kids.
actually
It'd be
do it.
really good for the kids.
We'll see. Sorry for the tangent.
That's
So
my-
are
that's
we
my fault.
consensus
Yeah, I
that
think we're
we'll
in
start?
consensus, we should
Yeah.
definitely
I will have a memo
have some idea
hopefully at the
about it.
next meeting.
Great, thanks,
Perfect.
Henry.
Thank you.
Oh, the other thing I was just gonna bring up quickly, because we still have ARPA money left.
Mhm.
And, when we're talking about hiring architects and doing things like that, maybe we can designate some of the money, the ARPA money left, because we have 242,000 towards some of that exploratory
Mhm.
work
Right.
with a designer.
Right.
Because again, it's a way of, without taking money out of people's pockets. And
Sure, yeah, that's definitely.
using that for, because we've already done, like, if we turn this into a green space, we're doing some things for the community, doing it,
Yep.
you know.
Yeah, and if you, and the conceptual review work that's, the study that's going on now is being funded by the ARPA money, so.
Mhm.
So it would be just a continuation of that.
Right.
Mhm.
So there's gonna be, this proposal for Edmund and Kesselring for designing the infrastructure, and we don't know how much that is going to be.
infrastructure, meaning the roads and all of that kind of stuff.
And the
Yeah,
water system.
And the water
Stormwater
system,
and,
but not the
And-
buildings.
Right.
And
That's
we need
just
park-
design
and the
soft
park-
costs.
Right,
Soft and some hard, there'll be stuff like test well.
Yeah,
stuff like
yeah.
that, you know, perk tests.
So I was actually thinking about the ARPA money being
Mhm.
allocated towards that.
yeah, see what that comes
Well,
out to
I
be.
think we've got enough for both, right? You mean for the designing?
Yes, just
Yeah.
the design.
We should know.
Not the architect, I think he's,
Right,
the
Right.
engineer design,
Possibly by the next.
but maybe for both.
Meeting.
Well, that's what I'm saying.
Yeah, possibly by the next meeting, we should have a handle on the size of that and what, how that stacks up against the ARPA funds available.
Okay.
With any luck, it'll be pretty close, hopefully.
So we have any other new business?
Move
Motion.
to adjourn.
Second.
after you extended the meeting, good job.
Typical Henry.
Sorry about that.
I think we need an all in favor.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah, all in favor?
Aye.
Frank, I have a question for you.
The recording has stopped.